What's good, Cubers? It's your boy Matt, and today I wanted to take a minute and try and answer a question that I got recently. In some of my videos lately, I've been analyzing cards and I've said that this card passes or fails the Vindicate Test, which led a viewer of mine to ask, well, what is the Vindicate Test? And so that's what we're going to talk about today and try and shed some clarity on this phrase that we use to evaluate cards for Cube and kind of see how good they are, how well they fit in our Cube. So, let's get started. Well, I guess if we're going to talk about the Vindicate Test, we should at least read the card Vindicate. So, Vindicate is 1, a white, and a black for a sorcery that reads, Destroy Target Permanent. And this is a fantastic cube card and a great removal spell that sees a play in a lot of cubes. And we use Vindicate to measure a creature card's value in the cube, i.e., if you cast a creature and pass the turn and your opponent cast Vindicate on the creature, do you get any value or are you hurt? Is it a 1-for-1 or did you obtain some kind of value before your creature left the field? Some people call this the Terminate test, but I actually think that that's a different thing and we'll talk about that in a minute. The easiest way to understand the Vindicate test is actually to apply it to some cards, so let's do that now. I thought we'd start with a newer card and a card that new cubers are more likely to know and have seen, and that's the Angel of Invention. So Angel of Invention is 3 and double white for a flying, vigilant, life-linking, fabricate 2. Other creatures you control get +1/+1 to 1 angel. Okay, wow, that's a lot of text. So the question is, if I play Angel of Invention and pass the turn, and my opponent casts Vindicate on it, do I get any value? And the answer is yes and no. So here's the thing. Angel of Invention passes the Vindicate test if we fabricate 2 and make the servo tokens. If the servo tokens are made, then when we pass the turn and our opponent casts Vindicate, at least we still have our servo tokens laying on the field. Whereas if we put the counters on the Angel and pass the turn and our opponent casts Vindicate, then actually the Angel doesn't pass the Vindicate test because we didn't get any value in return, which is why most of the time you'll want to go ahead and make the servo tokens so that the Angel can buff the whole field, buff your servo tokens, and give you 6 power for 5 mana. Let's look at another example. Here we have the Bane Slayer Angel. Now this card is considered a cube staple and is wildly popular as a 5 mana creature in most cubes. So let's take a peek. She's 3 and double white for a flying, first strike, life-linking, protection from demons, protection from dragons, 5/5 angel. Wow, that's a lot. But the card clearly fails the Vindicate test. If we play the Angel and pass the turn and Vindicate is cast on her, we lost tempo. And this is a big deal. We want to apply the Vindicate test to things that cost 4 or more. If someone casts Vindicate on your 1/1, that's not such a big deal. But if you're trying to play your game-ending threat and someone casts Vindicate on it, that really stinks. But then that begs the question, if this creature fails the Vindicate test, why is it such a popular cube staple? Well, that's actually a question we have to ask Patrick Chapin. Chapin is a Hall of Fame Magic player who famously said that there are 2 types of creatures, Mole Drifters and Bane Slayers. And what he means by that is that the Mole Drifter is a card that gives you value when you cast it. And then it has a body that sits around, and if it dies, that's fine. When Mole Drifter enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. If Vindicate is cast on Mole Drifter the following turn, you still netted 2 cards, i.e. you still got value. Bane Slayer, on the other hand, is a game-ending threat, but if she's Vindicated, then you lost value, you lost tempo. And so Chapin argues that there are 2 types of creatures, Mole Drifters and Bane Slayers, and that a deck needs some of each at the constructed level to be competitive. In Cube, however, we tend to stay with Mole Drifting types of creatures, even at the top end of our scale. But Bane Slayer is just so good at presenting an end-of-game threat that she passes the Vindicate test by virtue of being a boss. She's so good that if your opponent doesn't have Vindicate or a card like it, that she ends the game almost immediately. One swing with Bane Slayer creates a 10-point life swing. You gain 5, they lose 5. That's a huge swing in a game. And I bring this up to point out that the Vindicate test is really valid for evaluating cube cards, but it's not the end-all be-all. Let's look at another example. This is Niv-Mizzet Pyroon. Triple blue, triple red, legendary creature, dragon wizard, can't be countered, flying. When you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet Pyroon deals 1 damage to any target, Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. Now at first blush, Niv Mizzet does indeed pass the Vindicate test. You play Niv, and on the following turn they cast Vindicate, triggering Niv, you draw a card, deal a damage, and then Niv goes away, but you still got value off of him. So he's a perfectly cubable card, right? Not exactly. See, the problem with Niv is his prohibitive casting cost. Triple blue, triple red is almost impossible for a player to cast on curve without some serious mana fixing. So, while the Vindicate test would tell us that Niv Mizzet Pyrune is a cubable card, our eyes and other factors like his casting cost can tell us that, maybe Niv is not actually the best cube card. So, the Vindicate test is a nice starting point, but again, it's not the end-all be-all of card evaluation. Some players refer to the Vindicate test by another name. They call it the Terminate test. And essentially the test is the same except one major difference. Terminate is a spell, it does remove a creature the same way that Vindicate does, but it's at instant speed. So this test is actually more rigorous. What if you play your creature, and then before you can do anything with it, your opponent casts Terminate on it? Some cards wouldn't pass the Terminate test, but would pass the Vindicate test. Let's look at an easy example. Goblin Rabblemaster is a cube staple and a red aggro staple. For 2 and a red, you get a 2/2 goblin that says, other goblin creatures you control attack each turn if able. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token with haste. Whenever Goblin Rabblemaster attacks, it gets +1/+0 until the end of turn for each attacking goblin. Now this is a card that actually passes the Vindicate test. If we play Goblin Rabblemaster, during our combat step, he will make us a 1/1 red goblin creature token with haste. And that means that, in theory, we play him, on the following turn, Vindicate is cast on him, and we're left with a 1/1 token, which means we did get some kind of value. But, if we play Goblin Rabblemaster during our first main phase, and before we go to combat our opponent casts Terminate on him, here Goblin Rabblemaster flunks the Terminate test. But we definitely still play him in cube. So this is a great example of how the Terminate test is slightly more rigorous than the Vindicate test because instant speed is a killer. Passing the Vindicate test is a great first hurdle towards cube inclusion. It is a great way of measuring a card initially to see if it's even worth including in cube. But, as I said before, I don't know that you want to apply the Vindicate test to 1, 2, or maybe even 3 drops. If someone blows up your 2-drop with a Vindicate or a card like Vindicate, it's not quite the blowout it is as if they blow up your 5, 6, or 7-drop game-finishing creature. At the top end of your scale, you're gonna want to get value when you play your creatures. But, even still, there are some creatures that are just so good that you'll play them anyway, even if they flunk the Vindicate test. I would also point out that the Vindicate test becomes more relevant the more powerful your cube is. Higher powered cubes have better and stronger removal, or they have faster decks, and as a result, passing the Vindicate test becomes more and more important, as you're more likely to get blown out if your vanilla creature is blown away before you can get value off of it. But for starter cubes or people who are building their first cubes, the Vindicate test is a great thought, but it's not necessarily the only thing you need to think about. That's going to do it for today, cubers. Let me know in the comments below if there are any creatures that you play that flunk the Vindicate test but you still think are worth it. Hit that like and subscribe button so you can be sure not to miss our next video. Come on, hit the like button. It's right there. The little thumb. Press the little thumb. It means a lot to us here at Cube4Two. After that, shuffle up, and until next time, keep cubing, my friends.